Let's talk about charities. It's always been a bit of a bugbear of mine. You know, the bosses of charities, they go, oh, you know, because they're running big organisations, you know, they have to earn competitive salaries. You know, so you have bosses of charities getting like £500,000 a year, £400,000 a year. I mean, so I donate my money to a charity and loads of it goes into the bulging boss, the bulging pockets of the boss who runs it. That doesn't seem right to me. I'm not saying they should do their quite important jobs for £20 a week, but these massive salaries, they seem all wrong to me. So over the past 5 years, there has been a 35.7% increase in charities paying their chief executives over £400,000 a year. So the 400 grand a year salaries in the wonderful world of charity are rocketing, more and more of them every year. There's a charity called the Mary Stopes charity. It's a charity that promotes reproductive choices. A guy called, the boss of that is called Simon Cook. He earned £430,000. This was an obscene sub condemned by the Charity Commission. The Wellcome Trust, that's another charity, and that's for health and life sciences, wherever they are, pays 20 of its employees more than £400,000. So if you donate your money to the Wellcome Trust, that will in part go to the 20 employees who earn more than £400,000 a year. The Wellcome Trust Chief Investment Officer, and this is the humdinger, he's the Chief Investment Officer, so he's not actually the boss, but he's clearly, you know, investing the money, you know, making cash. You know, I'm not decrying that. Good. Guess how much he makes? He makes £5 million a year. £5 million a year. Oxfam, meanwhile, today was accused of weaponising history by claiming that Britain owes India £52 trillion in reparations. Tell you what, Oxfam, why don't you go and find something better to do than that kind of arrant nonsense? Oh yeah, okay, let's get the checkbook out. So turns out we owe India £52 trillion. Better pay it. It was a ridiculous waste of time. That's a waste of my money. If I donate to Oxfam, you're going to spend your time coming up with this rubbish. Come on, come on. By the way, Oxfam, I'm going to give it some credit now. They got criticised some years ago for the giant salaries they were paying a lot of their staff. And in fact, the boss of Oxfam now only earns something like a relatively low £125,000 a year. Now, that's a huge international organisation, so I wouldn't moan about that salary. But £5 million a year for somebody who's working for a charity is basically taking your money and stuffing his pockets full of it. No, come on. Let's talk to social and political commentator. He's been away too long, James Melville. Welcome back, James.
Hi, Kevin, you well?
I'm very, very good. I'm going to get you a bit on Ed Miliband in a little while because I know net zero and energy policies are your speciality. But I wanted to get your take on this. These super salaries of the charity bosses are obscene, aren't they? I mean, paying 20 executives on a single charity over £400,000 a year. Somebody called a chief investment officer earning £5 million a year. This is your money, my money. You know, you give it, you put it, your money in the collection box or whatever, and you know, you expect it's going to the good causes that these charities campaign for. But on many of them, it's mainly going into the pockets of the people who work there. It's all wrong, isn't it?
It is just charity for their own cause. I mean, the problem with this, it might dissuade a lot of people to spend their hard-earned money for a lot of very good causes. They'll wonder, where exactly is that money going to? It's not just charities. I mean, it seems to be happening across other aspects in terms of public spend, taxpayer spend as well. I mean, look at local authorities and some of the effectively public sector fat cat salaries that are going on there, you know, with our council tax money. And then you could argue this at various positions in government. You wonder what they're doing in terms of return on investment as well. But going back to the charities, I think there has to be an element of transparency about where the money is spent. But I don't want to get all Marxist about this. Of course, you've got to have leaders in organisations that get paid a fair whack, but not that sort of money, because the problem with that is ultimately, because people will be reading this, and ultimately the charities will suffer from this, and the causes will suffer because people will be reluctant at a very difficult time during a cost of living crisis to hand over their hard-earned cash if they think that effectively the chief exec or some sort of director are earning north of 7 figures. It's wrong. And ultimately, there has to be more transparency and accountability with the charities to ensure that there's public spend confidence, and the public, rightly so, in a difficult time, deserve that understanding and confidence to make sure that their hard-earned money goes to the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in November, and in October, where in the run-up to, of course, Poppy Day, Memorial Sunday and all that, when we all chuck in a few quid for our poppies, a very good cause. Royal British Legion organises that excellent fundraising effort every single year. But we discovered here at Talk that the Royal British Legion was spending quite a lot of money on diversity. Now, again, we've just done an item on diversity, the amount of money the NHS wastes on it. How many other organisations waste fortunes on diversity? I suppose that's their business. But a charity, and we got sort of lambasted. Well, you're making people not donate, not give for give to the charity appeal, the poppy appeal. So we're saying, well, don't take people's money and waste it on diversity. And if you're going to do that, as you suggest, James, be honest about it. Say, when you give us your £5 or whatever it is for your poppy, about £1.50 of it will go to diversity. And a lot of people said, well, I'm not going to buy a poppy this year. And I don't blame them. And I think we were right to reveal that. And to the people who donate to charities, who out of the goodness of their heart give charities their money, have a right to know how that money's going to be spent.
Completely. I mean, the vast majority of people are spending their money for the cause, not for the cause of lining the pockets of a charity fat cat. It's as simple as that. Of course, people need to be paid in these organisations. You've got to be realistic about it. But it's got to be fair. It's got to be accountable, because ultimately the public spend on charities, which is a huge sector, and at a difficult time, we're going through this ongoing Mobius loop of a cost of living crisis where people are struggling to make a choice between heat or eat. And so people are still going out there and giving their money to charities for people who are in an even worse situation than that. It's a difficult time. And if they see, and actually it's right to point out this, because if you do end up with more transparency and some fairer salaries, then it'll clean it up. And then more people will actually donate. And it's our job to point out these stories, because the public, at a difficult time, are getting fleeced all over the place, in particular by governments with, the highest tax burden since 1948. But if they're getting fleeced by charities that are paying fat cats far too much, and there's a high percentage of that total take of revenue that's going to individuals in the charity and not to the actual cause, then the public absolutely have every right to know that, and then possibly decide to spend their money elsewhere with other charities that aren't behaving like this.
Absolutely. And let's talk a bit about these people who are taking the 400 grand or the 430, or in one case, the extraordinary sum of £5 million.
We're in the wrong job, Kevin.
What do the... What, I mean, where's their charitable spirit? I mean, if I'm not known for my sort of moral superiority, but I think even I might lose a bit of sleep if I was taking £400,000 from a charity, that people donated to, thinking that somehow or other, I don't know, they're helping the donkeys or they're helping the starving people of Africa or whatever. What about these people? Where's their charitable instinct? They shouldn't be taking these huge salaries.
Yeah, completely, because the whole point of the charity is to help those in need. Almost every single form of charity is that. That's the very nature of the word charity. There's individuals who are giving their money to people who are in a worse situation than them. And so therefore the leaders within those charities, you would like to think, are there for the right reasons, because they care deeply about the people who they're trying to help within their charity. Yeah, if they're trousering north of 300, 400,000 or seven figures or whatever, then where is the moral accountability on that?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, of course, they should be doing it for free, and of course they should be well paid, but the difference between well paid and actually abusing effectively what the social contract is between the person who gives the money to the charity and where the charity spends its money on the cause. And that is the problem. And I think it's important to raise this issue because ultimately charities only survive. A lot of them are very good causes, but they only survive because of the well-being and the good behavior and the altruistic support of the punters out there. And in a difficult time, not just with charities, but with also public sector as well and government, every bit of finance needs to be scrutinised.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, whether it's a charitable donation or whether it's our tax spend, we have the right, because we're the ones spending the money, we have the right to know where that money is going.
Yeah. So you'll never get a sort of collector going, put it, please, for the charity. By the way, when you put your quid in there, or your £5, we do pay 20 of our executives more than £400,000 a year. Hello. They wouldn't get any money, would they? Yeah, I think it's a scandal. I think we need to look at this. Listen, before you go, though, James, we covered the story of crazy Ed Miliband earlier. I mean, first of all, there are two things I want to ask you about. I spoke to Ross Clark about this, who wrote a great article in the Spectator about it. So Ed Miliband has today, in response to Donald Trump basically saying no more net zeros, and he goes, sorry, Donald, but net zero is unstoppable. Yeah, Ed, except Donald just stopped it. So there's one glaring nonsensity from our great net zero secretary. But here's the other one. This is the one I want to ask you about. So, you and I have discussed this many times. Why do these virtue-signalling British politicians condemn us to being colder and poorer, all these restrictions, high energy prices, windmills, solar panels, when we know that nothing this country can do will make any difference because we don't really pollute the world at all. We produce less than 1% of the world's carbon emissions. So we go to Ed, why are you doing this? Well, it's very important that we are a world leader, and by these policies we show the way and other countries will follow. How's that going, Ed, in terms of America? So his policy is nonsense, but Xi Jinping in Beijing, oh my God, have you seen everything that Britain's doing about greenery? Or maybe I should change all of China's energy policies. It's just juvenile. It's ridiculous. And Donald Trump just exposed it for the fantasy world claptrap that it is.
Oh, completely. I mean, if you look at total emissions, I mean, China accounts for more than the developed world put together. And here we are.
28%, 28%.
Yeah. Here we are, it always feels like the government, on many issues, they're grandstanding because they like to show off at COP and at Davos and all those jamborees of great virtue, when actually all they are is jamborees of hypocrisy. I mean, you see how many private jets are in Davos at the moment in their motorcades where they strut around saying they're going to save the planet. I mean, it's ridiculous. And Miliband's part of this. I mean, Miliband and Starmer, they're never in the country. They're always trotting off somewhere else, just talking about, how they're great global leaders and, world leaders in net zero. Ultimately, net zero will only do one thing, make them feel better on the world stage, but it will destroy our economy. It will massively risk our energy supply. It's already been proven. We can't rely on what they're doing. It's also taking apart large tracts of prime agricultural land where Ed Miliband is plastering solar panels against community objections in many cases on an enormous scale. There's one in Norfolk that's north of 4,000 acres. That's ridiculous. And then you have an argument about the hypocrisy about what a lot of these materials are made from in terms of wind turbines and also in terms of electric vehicles and where the materials come from. A lot of those materials come from, guess where? China or child slaves in Congo. The whole thing is utterly ridiculous. I think a lot of the world are beginning to distance themselves from it because they see what's happening to their economy. The Germans are distancing, they've gone back to coal. Trump's doing Trump things, which is not a surprise. And meanwhile, we're left with Britain, with these cranks who are in charge simply because they want to strut around on the global stage, acting like they're the big I am, but with a complete disregard for what the function and form is in the UK economy and also our energy supply. If we want to do something for energy in this system, in this country, join it up with all the components. We're surrounded by oil and gas. So why don't we actually do that instead of decommissioning new sites in the North Sea, which is costing lots of jobs, destroying aspects of our manufacturing industry, for the alternative, the slavish worshipping on the altar of net zero, which ultimately is complete crass logic.
Yeah, and why don't we do that, James? I'll explain it to you. It's because our net zero secretary is a raving lunatic. That's why. It's as simple as that. Good to have you back on the show, James. We'll get you back on again very soon. James Melville there, social and political commentator. Charity fat cat, Ed Zero Brains, Ed Miliband, net zero nutter. Your thoughts? I mean, this guy, I tell you, within 2 years, the lights are going to go out. It might even be sooner. He is driving this country towards power cut city, power outages all over the country. And when the people lose their power, the government who presided over that also lose their power. They will be voted out of power. The people do not put up with no power. And this idiot, this zealot, this evangelical deranged man, Ed Miliband, is going to plunge us into darkness. Trust me, trust me. This is insane, folks. It's insane.